All right, let's get started. Hello everyone, welcome to this NativeScript launch event. Today, of course, we are covering anything and everything having to do with NativeScript 5.0. This new version of NativeScript was literally just released days ago, and we're here to provide you all the guidance you need to be as successful as possible using all the new bells and whistles provided. Now, as a brief history lesson, the 4.0 line of NativeScript releases were very much focused on performance. So things like app startup time and user experience, those saw dramatic improvements over the past year or so. And of course, it's not that we're done with performance improvements, but 5.0 is more focused on improving your experience as a developer with NativeScript. We really asked ourselves, what can we do to help you be more efficient and thus create better apps? So a big part of this improved developer experience is laid out here in emoji form, that being hot module replacement. Traditionally, as NativeScript developers, you relied on our live sync technology to avoid full rebuilds and quickly deploy changes to your devices. However, live sync didn't maintain the state of your app, so every time your app refreshed, you might have to navigate a couple of screens to find your place. Well, those days are pretty much gone with hot module replacement. More on this in a bit. So before we really get started today, I do have some logistical issues to quickly cover. If you encounter any problems today with your audio or video, rest assured we will have a full recording of this webinar available on YouTube in the coming days. You'll be able to find it on the NativeScript YouTube channel at bit.ly/YouTube-NS, and we will of course send you a follow-up email with the link. Now, I want to make sure you know that you can also learn about the recording via Twitter. So follow us at NativeScript for all the latest news and mobile app gossip. And as we usually do during the webinar today, feel free to use the Ask NativeScript hashtag on Twitter to ask us any questions you have. We have a stable of NativeScript experts ready to help you right now through the end of the webinar. Now, we're also going to try and do a Q&A at the end of the webinar here. At the end of our last webinar, I admit I screwed things up a bit when trying to get more than one person talking at the same time, but hopefully I've learned from my mistakes. We shall see. Now, to stay up to date on NativeScript, I highly recommend you subscribe to NativeScript News. We send out some really great info in this email newsletter, usually about once a month or so. And when you get started with NativeScript, you'll inevitably need some help along the way. One powerful resource is Slack. We have over 9,000 folks ready to lend you a hand. Sign up at nativescript.org/Slack. You can also ask questions on Stack Overflow. Just use the NativeScript tag and one of our amazing community folks will surely help you out. My name is Rob Lauer and I manage the Progress Mobility Developer Relations team. I'll be your host today as we shift between our speakers. You can find me on Twitter at Rob Lauer. And we often get a lot of new NativeScript developers at these webinars, or some folks who are just curious. Hello to all of you out there. If you are new, it might be helpful for you to know that NativeScript is a free and open source framework used to create truly native mobile apps for both iOS and Android from a single code base. Now, it's not Cordova or PhoneGap. It's more like React Native, but for Angular or Vue instead of React. You can use your web skills like JavaScript, CSS, and an HTML-like markup language to create these apps. You also have the option of using two of the most popular JavaScript frameworks available today, Angular or Vue, or no framework at all. So when it comes to creating these native mobile apps, NativeScript really shines in some key areas. One is performance. NativeScript apps are truly native. When you add a button element to your app, for example, the NativeScript framework automatically transforms that into a native UI button on iOS and an Android widget button on Android, all without you having to write a single line of Swift, Objective-C, or Java. Apps written with NativeScript use JavaScript, TypeScript, Angular, or Vue. Apps are styled with CSS, the same CSS you've been using for years, and the markup is a friendly XML syntax. NativeScript gives you access to the entire libraries of both iOS and Android device APIs without relying on plugins. You can also share code between existing web apps and your mobile NativeScript apps. Now, if you're not necessarily an early adopter, you should know that NativeScript has been around a while, since 2015 in fact, and while this chart is not quite to scale, you can see that our usage of NativeScript around the world has exploded in popularity over the past year. We are up about 2,000% in monthly downloads from August of 2016 to October of 2018. So this equates to well over 3 million total downloads to date, along with more than 15,000 stars on GitHub. And if you're the type of person who likes the reassurance of known companies using a framework before you feel comfortable taking the leap, take a look at just some of these well-known organizations who use NativeScript. So if you're just getting started with NativeScript, a good first step is the NativeScript Playground. The Playground is a completely web-based environment that lets you walk through some tutorials, do some coding, and deploy an app to your phone. But starting with 5.0, it isn't the only easy way to get started. Hear me out for a sec. Traditionally, when developing mobile apps locally, I don't care what framework you're using, there are a series of hoops for you to jump through. From installing SDKs to configuring emulators or settings on your devices, this one-time setup can be a bit of a turnoff. However, with NativeScript 5.0, we've made the local development process even easier by removing some of these steps. The command is TNS Preview, and you're going to learn all about it today. Alright, let me introduce our speakers. Starting off, we have TJ Van Tol, our principal developer advocate here at Progress. Find TJ on Twitter at TJ Van Tol. We also have Jen Looper, our senior developer advocate, who you may also find on Twitter at Jen Looper. Listen closely and you may learn a thing or three from these folks. Before I hand the reins over to TJ, I wanted to briefly acknowledge all of our community supporters who have contributed their time and code to making NativeScript successful over the years. Now, what you see here are just a sample of some of the folks who have contributed to just one of our repositories on GitHub. Thank you all very, very much. And remember to use that Ask NativeScript hashtag on Twitter for any questions during the webinar. And with that, TJ, the stage is yours.
All right, thanks so much, Rob. My name is TJ. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to be a part of this NativeScript 5.0 release. I've been a part of the NativeScript team for a long time. I actually got started with NativeScript version 0.3, which has been a long time now. And I think I could safely say that this is really the biggest release that we've ever had. It just really has some new features and some new ways of approaching NativeScript development that can really fundamentally change your day-to-day workflow. Now I'm going to cover two of the new features that we're shipping as part of NativeScript 5.0. The first, hot module replacement, is really the big one and the one that's probably going to most fundamentally change the way you approach NativeScript app development. And the second is some changes to how we handle safe area support on newer iOS devices like the iPhone 10 and the iPhone XS. So if you've struggled laying out your applications on these devices, I think we have some really cool changes to help you out. But let's start with hot module replacement. And to explain how hot module replacement, or HMR, works, we have to talk a little bit about how NativeScript works. NativeScript apps run on JavaScript. And one of the big advantages of using this architecture is JavaScript is an interpreted language, meaning after every change you make, NativeScript doesn't have to run your apps through a full compilation cycle, which you'd normally have to do if you were building your apps through something like Android Studio or Xcode. When you change a JavaScript file in your NativeScript app, the NativeScript CLI detects that change, sends the updated file over to your device, and refreshes your app so you can see that change within a second or two, which is really great and is a whole lot faster than if you were building apps through sort of traditional native app development means. But we knew we could do better, and what we specifically wanted to avoid is that refresh that happens on device after each JavaScript change you make. And this is where Webpack comes in. Webpack has this feature called hot module replacement, or HMR. This is where we get the term from. And to quote their documentation, HMR lets you exchange, add, or remove modules while your application is running and without having to do a full application reload. Basically, it's a way of avoiding the app refreshes that I just talked about. So for NativeScript 5.0, we implemented this Webpack feature. You now have the ability to change your JavaScript or TypeScript code and see those changes really instantaneously without having to reload or refresh your apps. And really, the GIF I have here doesn't do the feature justice, So we're going to look at a demo of HMR here in a second. But first, one quick note, HMR in NativeScript 5.0 is a beta feature, meaning it should work fine for your applications, but there are a few small workflow things that we know we want to clean up, and I'm going to mention those as I go throughout my demo. So let's go ahead and get started and see this in action. All right, what you're seeing here is my terminal, and what I did was create 3 new NativeScript applications from scratch. One with NativeScript Core, one with NativeScript and Angular, and one with NativeScript and Vue.js. Now first, one note, because hot module replacement is a Webpack feature, to use HMR in your NativeScript apps, you must install the NativeScript Webpack plugin. So for each of these apps you see here, I also ran npm install NativeScript-dev-webpack, which is the NativeScript Webpack plugin, and I included the --save dev flag to save this plugin as a developer dependency for these applications. So if you're going to try HMR out in your own apps, and we highly recommend that you do, you're going to need to include this Webpack plugin first. And at this point, we really have everything we need to try this out. So I'm going to start by heading into this NativeScript Core app, and I'm just going to go ahead and run this on an iOS simulator right away. To do so, I'll use the TNS run command as normal. I want to run this on iOS. I want to run this on a simulator, so I'll include the --emulator flag. But I'm going to add a new flag we introduced with NativeScript 5.0, and that's the --HMR flag. HMR, as I've mentioned, is short for hot module replacement, and the flag really is just telling the NativeScript CLI to enable this new feature. And from here, this will take a second to start up, but your workflow is going to remain exactly the same. So while this is loading, I'm going to go ahead and open this project up in my emulator. So this main view model is the file I'm interested in. So I'm going to bring this open and then drag this simulator, which now has my app, and bring that over here so you can see these side by side. So as I said, with this new flag, your workflow is exactly the same, but there's going to be one big difference. So if I go in here and update this counter, so this counter 42 corresponds to this value that you see here. You'll notice that as soon as I save this change, the CLI back here detects that change, and I automatically see that update on my device. And even though this seems kind of simple, this can enormously speed up how quickly you can develop your apps. This feature works with Vue and Angular as well, so to show that, I'm going to switch back over here to this Vue application. I'm going to run this Vue application. This time I'm going to run things on Android instead, just to show you how things work on that OS. I'll bring up this app while my emulator is getting fired up there on the other side of my screen. After letting that load up, I'll drag my emulator over here. And when I make a change here, for example, if I update this message, you can see how I again instantly see that change on my device. Now to finish out our trio of applications here, HMR also works in Angular applications as well, but there is one additional step you need to take that's specific to Angular. To show this, I'm going to switch over to this Angular app and open this one in my editor as well. And what I need to do to enable HMR is add some new code to my application's main.ts file, which I'm going to go ahead and paste in right now. The reason we require you to manually add this snippet is because in an Angular app, your app module does not have to be named app.module, and it doesn't have to be at this path either. So if your app module is something other than following this standard, you are going to have to go in here and manually change that up to fix paths and imports and such. That being said, this is a step that we're looking to automate in a future release. As I mentioned earlier, HMR is still a beta feature in NativeScript. But in the meantime, you can find the snippet I'm using here, as well as detailed information on using HMR in Angular at bit.ly/ng-HMR. There's a wiki page on the NativeScript Angular GitHub repo that will walk you through all of this. Here's the snippet that I'm using right here. Now that I have this snippet in place, though, I can use HMR in this app exactly as I did with my NativeScript Core and Vue applications. So I'm going to go ahead and run this thing on the iOS simulator. Make sure to include the --HMR flag as well. I'll give this a second to load on my device, and then you'll see that the same workflow is in place, that if I go in here and make a change to my application, HMR is going to detect that change and instantly push it out to my application. Now, before I leave this Angular app, though, there's one other trick that I want to show you that I think is pretty cool. So suppose I'm using HMR and I navigate to a different page of this application, and I want to start working on this component as well. So I go into the implementation of this details component, Maybe I want to say that actually the name of all these items should actually just be TJ. Now, when I save this change, you can see that HMR detected that change. It pushed it out to this device without needing to reload the application. But I did lose my application state. The route of my app that I was viewing just got reset when this change took place, which sort of takes away from the really fast development cycle we're aiming for with HMR in NativeScript. To address that, we're offering a few new HMR hooks that you can subscribe to in your applications. And if I go back to my browser and this same NativeScript Angular wiki page, there's a section on the bottom here that's going to walk you through using these new hooks, which are called on before live sync and on after live sync. And there's a sample gist here that has some specific code that you can just copy and paste into your application and use. Now, I've already done this in our sample app here. So if I go back to this main.ts file, I have this file called live sync navigation, which I just got verbatim from this wiki page right here. So if I enable it, which I can do by just uncommenting this line of code, if I go back to my details components now, and let's say I navigate here, and I get way more excited about my name TJ here, when I save that change, you'll notice that that change takes place immediately, and I also don't navigate. I just sort of stay on the same route that I'm using. And I mean, this is really pretty awesome. If you've developed NativeScript apps of any size, you have an idea of just how much time this can save you. And there's other things you can potentially do with these hooks as well. So if we take a look at this code, essentially just at a very high level, what this is doing is caching the URL of the Angular router being used, and then really just reapplying it after the live sync or the HMR takes place. But there's potentially other things that you can do here to maintain the state of your application or really improve your testing workflow as you're developing your own NativeScript apps. Overall, HMR has the ability to greatly improve your productivity as you develop NativeScript applications. And we strongly encourage you to enable HMR in your own projects to take advantage of the improved development speeds right away. There's really no reason not to. Now, there were two features I wanted to discuss, and the other is related to safe areas on iOS. First of all, the term safe area is a term that Apple essentially invented with the release of the iPhone X. The iPhone X has a notch, and it also has this little control bar at the bottom of the screen. And to avoid content displaying sort of on top of these controls, on top of the notch in this control bar over here, iOS by default changed to render certain components only in the device's safe areas, which are highlighted in blue in these images. The problem is, oftentimes you really want content to render outside of the device's safe areas. And if you have any existing NativeScript apps that you've sort of tested or tried out on the iPhone X or iPhone XS, you might have hit some of the problems like this, where you really want your content to extend past the safe areas. So for NativeScript 5.0, we've actually changed the default behavior of a number of our UI controls, including all of our layouts, the list view, the scroll view, the web view, and the repeater as well, to automatically overflow safe areas by default. And to show you how this works, let's look at one more quick demo. What I have here is actually a NativeScript Angular code sharing app. You might recognize it if you've went through the Angular Tour of Heroes demo at all. And as we were developing this app, we hit the exact problem I showed in the slides earlier, where I really want this page's main layout here to extend beyond the iOS safe area, but you can see that it's being cut off and that this kind of looks bad in this layout. Now, I'm happy to say that with NativeScript 5, this layout really works exactly as you'd want by default. And I'm actually having to force this layout using a flag here that I'm going to discuss here momentarily. But if I take that out, you can see that my main layout container now extends beyond the safe area. So my list here actually looks really nice as I scroll down through this. And it also works fine if I change my device here to landscape mode. I get the same really nice display that I really want on this iPhone X. Now, there are some situations where you might want to restrict your components specifically to a device's safe area. And that's where this new attribute comes in. The attribute is called iOS Overflow Safe Area. Now, the attribute is true by default, but you can change it to false if you hit one of those scenarios. So if I change this back to false, if I put this attribute back in and make a change to my app, you can see that my layout is again restricted specifically to the safe areas on this iPhone device. So hopefully you'll find that your apps work exactly as you want them to by default, and that you have the ability to restrict your components to safe areas in situations where you need that behavior. Between HMR and these safe area improvements, hopefully you get a sense of just how powerful NativeScript 5.0 is. But there's still one really pretty awesome feature of NativeScript 5 that you need to see. And to show that, I'm going to turn things over to my colleague Jen Looper.
Thanks very much, TJ. Hey everyone, my name is Jen Looper. You can always find me on Twitter at Jen Looper. And I'm going to talk to you today about some cool changes that 5.0 is bringing you with the CLI. So before I demo some of these really cool changes that you're going to find in the CLI, I just want to go over a couple breaking changes that do exist. This is a major release, so of course we need to do a couple upgrades that are going to break a couple of things in case you are building your apps in certain ways. So the first one I want to talk about is that if you are building your Android app using an older Android runtime and you want to rebuild it in 5.0, you might encounter an error because previously we were passing this parameter to Gradle, and that parameter was specifying the support library version. And that's no longer necessary. So if you want to keep doing this, if you want to keep using that support library in your app, you need to go ahead and add this line right here, project ext support version 26.0.0 alpha 1 to your app Gradle file. Another breaking change is that you can no longer build for iOS with Xcode 8 or below. Sorry kids, it is time to upgrade. And another iOS-oriented breaking change is that you can no longer build for iOS with the CLI using Mac OS Sierra and below. It is definitely time to upgrade. And the last breaking change I want to just point out is that you need to install Android SDK 28 to build for Android. So I just went ahead and opened up Andrew Studio and found the SDK panel here in System Settings and just made sure that I had Android SDK API 28 installed. So I am off to the races. So with all of that out of the way, and you can always take a look at the release notes to kind of give yourself a refresher on any breaking changes, what I want to talk about now going forward is the new and very cool interactive CLI that we have released with 5.0. So let's take a look at how this works. I'm going to go ahead and open up a command prompt here, and I'm just going to type TNS create with 5.0 installed. And I'm given a couple of prompts, so it's asking me what kind of app I'm going to build. And I chose an NS View app because that's the way I'm building apps nowadays, as some of you might know. So I go ahead and choose that in the command prompt, and it starts building me a nicely scaffolded Vue app. So it's going to go ahead and do some installations here. Good, the binary is fine. Now I'm going to CD into my new app, and I'm just going to do TNS run iOS. And watch out, I added that -- bundle, the bundle flag, because I need to force Webpack to start moving. I need to make Webpack work to bundle up my app so that it'll run properly, and so that my single file components in Vue will go ahead and be compiled. So just watch out when you're using the new CLI with Vue, you need to use -- bundle. So this actually caught me out, and I just wanted to flag that for you. So I'll go ahead and open up my code so you can see what's being scaffolded here. And let's move this over here and take a look at what's going on. You can see Webpack is kicking in and it's building me a nice app. So while we're waiting, we can take a look at what's being scaffolded. It looks like a nice Vue app to me. It has some components here, it has a nice fonts folder. Ooh, there's a single file component there. And it's building me a very simple app with a little computed property here that's giving me a message. And I'm going to go ahead and make some changes to that message so that you can see how live sync is working within my NativeScript View app. So I scaffolded out a nice app here. I'm going to go ahead and open it in the emulator. I'm going to make a quick change here to the message that's being returned here in the computed property. It's going to do a rebuild here. Notice I didn't do any kind of fancy HMR stuff. We'll take a look at that another day. But here we are. And you can see that we've built a very nice basic NativeScript View app with the new CLI tool. Let's go ahead and open up another window here, and we're going to just do another TNS create. So this time I'm going to go ahead and create a new Angular app. I'll call it my new Angular app. And take a look at the choices that are presented to me now when I choose Angular. So here I'm given the choice of either creating a Hello World, a side drawer app, or a tabs app. I'm going to go ahead and choose tabs because this is a really nice layout that we offer, and it's definitely a very full-featured template. So it's scaffolded out a tabs app for me. I'm going to go CD into this app, and we'll go ahead and do a TNS run iOS. We don't need any kind of bundling flags here, just run that iOS app. You could also be running, of course, an Android app. For some reason, I always pick iOS. It's just what I'm used to. So it'll go ahead and open up an emulator. And while we're waiting, I'll just open up the code that's being scaffolded behind the scenes. So let's see what was created here. If we open up the source folder, oh, here comes the emulator. Okay, we're going to open up the source folder. Here it is. And you can see that we basically have several components that have been scaffolded out for us. And starting with the home component, it's basically a list with some details in the item detail folder. So now the app is going to go ahead and open, and we can just do a little walkthrough of what we're looking at here. So you can see the nice tabs here. There's a browse page and a search page and a home page, which is a kind of master detail page. Very convenient. Everyone needs a master detail page at some point in their app development life. And the cool thing to watch is that on iOS, you notice that those tabs are sticky. You go from item to detail and nothing budges. This is very sweet. And you notice I just made a little change in the action bar, and it was picked right up by LiveSync. Very, very nice. Okay, so moving on, let's just do this all over again. We're going to go ahead and do another TNS create, and this time I'm going to call this my new side drawer Angular app, because I'm going to demo the side drawer version of the Angular app here. So I chose side drawer in the prompts, and it's going to go ahead and scaffold me out a very sweet side drawer app. Okay, here comes that node install, and it's going to go ahead and get this scaffold working. So I can CD into my new side drawer Angular app and go ahead and do a TNS run iOS one more time. No need to go ahead and add bundle to it. So we will go ahead and open this up as well in Visual Studio Code and take a look at what the code looks like. So once again, let's open source folder and take a look in the app folder. Looks a little similar. We have the typical, home page with a search and a browse, some featured component here, a search component, and some settings. But here is the action bar and a grid layout in home. Let's see if we can dig around and find out where the side drawer is. I'll bet you it is in the app component itself. There it is. That's what I was looking for. The rad side drawer. Here's where the layout is kind of all set for the side drawer, and then you have the scroll view for the main app. So we'll wait for the emulator to kind of pick up the changes, and you'll see a nice side drawer app. And here we are, it's coming up, and we can see that we have a nice home page here, and there's a side drawer, and all of the icons are all set for you. That's work you don't have to do. Here's a browse page, search page, featured page, and a settings page already scaffolded for you. And last but not least, I want to go ahead and do one more TNS create for you here. And we're going to call this one my new vanilla app, because I'm just going to scaffold a plain old JavaScript app like we used to do back in the olden days. Just kidding, actually. So we're here in this nice vanilla app. We're also presented with a hello world, a side drawer, and a tab view. You can also do this with TypeScript if you like. I just wanted to show you the vanilla app as a kind of tribute for our vanilla ambassadors who were so awesome this last summer. So it's going to go ahead and scaffold one of those hello world apps with the little counter in it. And while that's being built, I'll go ahead and open up the code that was scaffolded in Visual Studio Code, and we can take a look at what the code looks like as we're running it in the emulator. So here I have this opened up, and you can take a look in the app folder. Look in the XML page for your standard markup in a vanilla app. The main view model.js has the business logic oftentimes in your vanilla app. And this is basically creating this counter app, the typical kind of hello world app that we've been presenting for NativeScript developers for a long time. And I'll just go ahead and make a quick change. I'm not going to save it. We'll wait for the app to come up in the emulator. And when it does, I'll go ahead and save the app off so that you can see how fast the LiveSync experience is. Okay, the app is now coming up in the emulator. You can see that it's a typical kind of tap challenge app that we've been showing as a hello world for a little while. I just saved the change that I made, and you probably didn't even notice that it went live, but it was so fast, and you can go ahead and play with the hello world tap button as much as you want, but I just wanted to show you how fast the LiveSync action is. Before I turn the mic back over to Rob, I just want to say one more thing about this awesome 5.0 release, and that is the introduction of one more CLI command, which is TNS Preview. So let's take a look at that. So here I have opened a terminal window, and I'm going to go ahead and CD into this new Angular app that I created earlier, and I'm going to go ahead and type TNS Preview. Now this is new in the CLI, and what it does is it does a bit of a build here, and then it creates a QR code right in the terminal. This is kind of amazing. So we basically brought the functionality of the NativeScript playground right into the terminal so that you can really have this great developer experience within the command line, but same as if you were in the playground. So I'm going to go ahead and use my playground app on my phone, which I'm broadcasting here, and I'm going to scan that QR code, and it's going to bring up the app that I just scaffolded. So let me just drag the code over this way a little bit so we can see what I'm doing. I'm going to go ahead and start making some changes. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm not very excited about item 1 and item 2, so I'm going to create a little app that's going to show seals. So first thing I need to do is change the action bar title to seals. Go ahead and save that, get live sync fired up right here. Here we go. And now I think I need to change the color of the action bar to a nice seal color, which is kind of a gray color. And so we'll just add the background color to gray. That's much nicer, I think. We'll go ahead and save that up. There we go. And then I need to change the actual data. So I have a little bit of JSON that I've saved from another project that has a list of seals with their ID, name, and description. And I'm going to go ahead and just swap that right in here. And we'll go ahead and take a look at the app as it refreshes. And here we go. Now you can see a nice, lovely master detail list of seals, one of my favorite animals. So obviously this is not the most beautiful app in the world. I need to fix some of the wrapping and that sort of thing, but I think we're on our way to yet another blockbuster, an awesome app about seals. I hope you're as excited as I am about all the new changes that have come with the 5.0 release, including the interactive CLI, TNS Preview, HMR, and some of the cool stuff that we've been demoing. But I also just want to switch gears for a second here and just remind you that we have this very special project called NativeScript-View.org. This is run by Igor Rangelovich, our extremely talented community member. A lot of love to Igor. He's doing great. You can always hop on this website if you're specifically looking to build NativeScript apps with Vue.js. We are at 2.0.2 at this moment. I think it would be smart if you are currently using NativeScript View to go ahead and upgrade to 2.0.2. There was a little bit of a memory leak issue in a prior release, and we just want to make sure that you don't get hit by that. We're making efforts to make the docs as good as we can, to make the community as welcoming as we can. We are also making changes to support the Vue CLI 3. There's a lot of work behind the scenes being done. If you're interested in helping us out, we would really appreciate it. Hop on our NativeScript Slack channel in the Vue room, and we'll get you started, and maybe you can help us create the next awesome Vue plugin and get ready for Vue 3, which is coming up sometime next year. So this is, NativeScript View is evolving as Vue is evolving. So it's an exciting time to be a Vue developer, as it is to be a NativeScript developer. So with that, I'll pass the mic right on back to Rob. Thank you very much for listening.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jen, and thank you, TJ. Remember, there is still time to get your NativeScript questions in on Twitter, and stay tuned as we are still planning on a Q&A at the end of our show. Now, while TJ and Jen just covered a lot of what we released with 5.0, it wasn't everything. Many people contributed to some other smaller but important features you should be aware of. The first is that you can now have separate app IDs for both iOS and Android. This is useful especially when you're trying to reuse old app IDs for new projects. Our NativeScript View integration now has access to all of our premium NativeScript UI components like charts, calendars, gauges, data forms, and more. Plugin authors will find it a little easier to create plugins with the new TNS plugin create command. We've also made some changes that resulted in about 20 to 30% speed improvements for traditional live sync and debug actions. Finally, as with every release, we've killed plenty of bugs along the way. And one more time, if you're late to the show, we did cover the following new major features in 5.0, this time in emoji form for you. Hot module replacement to give you stateful app reloading during development. Full support for those iOS safe areas on the iPhone 10 line of devices. A new interactive CLI that makes framework and template selection much easier. And TNS Preview brings the playground experience to your local development environment. Now, I also wanted to mention that recently our community members Mike and Nick Branstein updated the NativeScript book. It's available for free today at nativescript.org/book. It's completely free, no signups or anything, just download it. And speaking of our community, our friends at nativescripting.com have released a brand new course you may be interested in. NativeScript View Introduction is a comprehensive intro to using Vue with NativeScript. So it's a set of 49 video lessons for the low price of $49. Check it out at nativescripting.com. Now, I'm happy to announce for you today that 5.0 is not the last NativeScript release you'll see in 2018. NativeScript 5.1 is going to drop in December. This is our holiday release, so get ready. While the exact details of the release are still cooking, I can tell you that we are planning on bringing full Angular 7 support to 5.1, along with improved hot module replacement capabilities, and enabling more scenarios on using flexible root composition with Angular. Of course, we're going to have more information on this release in the coming weeks. So with that, I thank you all for attending. It's time now for us to at least attempt to get our Q&A working, so bear with us for a minute as we try to switch over.